Difficult roads lead to beautiful destinations. 1,250 miles is a long road. The Coliseum in Rome to running home. UTS 50K, a season highlight. Hello and welcome to the Ultra Running Podcast with me, Coach Marshy. I hope you're all well and I hope that training is still going in the right direction for you, wherever it is you are training and whatever it is you're training for. For my own personal journey, that road to recovery and that return to ultra running very much continues, and training seems to be on the right direction at the time of recording this episode. So let's bring in a special guest today. We are going to welcome Dan to the show. Hello, Dan. How are you?
Hey, Marshy. Yeah, good to be here. Slightly cooler today after the hottest day of the year yesterday. So, yeah, it's great to be on the podcast with you.
Yeah, any running on the hottest day ever?
I did actually. Yeah, I got out for half an hour, and then that was enough. It's just to shake out. It's just to stretch the legs, get on the local trails, get my fix, and then straight back into the shade. Much needed.
So, Dan, before we dive into anything in particular, let's kind of introduce yourself to the listeners and the viewers, and tell us who you are and what you kind of do day to day and your involvement within the running community.
Yeah, of course. So I'm an ultra runner, the right place for it. But yeah, I'm an ultra runner. I'm a TEDx and mental health speaker. So I've had my lived experiences, which I'm sure we'll dive into, Marshy. And then I'm also a partnerships and community manager for a couple of really cool organisations. So a snow sports charity called Snow Camp. We change the lives of underprivileged young people by getting them away to the mountains, and the Running Industry Alliance as well. So, I am sort of heavily involved with the running industry, with the B2B side of things, with various brands and charities and live events, bringing this amazing alliance together as well. But yeah, since a notable running adventure in 2017, I've just been kicking around a lot in the trail and ultra space. And as we touched on just before jumping on, it's just a pleasure to share what we know and dive into this whole world, all from a place of passion for getting out there on the trails.
Yeah, so just before we do dive into it, I'm going to just explain to the listeners that the way we kind of touched base originally was at UTS, so Ultra Trail Snowdonia by UTMB, and I was just in one of the aid stations doing some recording for that episode, and some of the listeners and viewers may have seen it and heard it. And I went out to the car, thought, well, I'm going to have a break, I'm going to have some lunch. And I went and grabbed some lunch, and then you came running past and just kind of like looked at me, and kind of we sort of looked at each other a bit. And then
it was beautiful.
You said, oh, I think I look at your, I think you said, oh, I listened to your podcast, or I've seen your podcast, because you'd read on the t-shirt, the Ultra Running Podcast. And so just so that the guys are aware, that's sort of how we met. And I believe that was just before you were about to go up Snowdon itself, right? For the first time on that event.
Well, the first time on the second day.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
Which we can touch on that actually when we get to that bit.
Yeah, exactly. But no, you're right. It's just, I'm a big believer that things happen for a reason at the right times. And, there's certain voices now where like you can just clearly sense their passion, for this whole space. And as I say, it's been 2017, which I've, been bouncing around, the trail scene, the ultra running scene. So yeah, as soon as I came across your podcast quite a few months ago now, I've just been digesting as much as I can. And then obviously when I saw your friendly face just after that aid station, it was meant to be. And here we are 2 weeks on. And it's really cool to be diving into this whole world together.
Yeah, no, thanks very much for saying that and coming on the show, because it's it's speaking to people like yourself and having this platform where we can allow people to come across to let anyone who is in any part of their ultra journey kind of absorb as a sponge and see if they can get anything from it. And I'm sure you've got loads to tell, and I'm looking forward to asking you a couple of questions. So I do want to dive into it, and I do want to unpack it with you. But let's start with a really simple question that I appreciate perhaps doesn't have a simple answer. So why ultra running, and sort of what got you into it?
I always go back to this word of like purity with ultra running. And that, for me, there's such a sense of purity and I guess connection that comes with ultra running in particular. And when I say that, there's just you know, I haven't come across anything else that that needs as much of your as much of your own sense of intentionality with how you're looking after yourself and how you're being kind to yourself whilst pushing yourself to achieve something quite extraordinary. And through that sort of sense of oneness, I guess, if you want to call it that, there's a real just sense of purity and that connection to every other runner that's out there with you in the wilder ultra running community. And, you know, always go back to this phrase about being alone together, because ultimately it is just you in your head. You're the one person who you spend 100% of your life with. And, you know, that is so true over those 2 or those 3 days, those, you know, those multi-stage events where it's just you out there on these incredible landscapes, and just that kind of real sense of fluidity and escapism of just putting one foot in front of the other and using distraction in a positive way when you can to let, you know, just to go through the motions of practicing that self-care whilst at the same time pushing yourself to achieve something, you know, beyond your limits a lot of the time is, you know, it's just such a sense of purity with that. And you know, I know that's you know, you've got the book The Lost Art of Running with Shane Benzie, Marshy. I saw it on the background of one of your previous episodes, but there's you know, a lot of the stuff that Shane Benzie talks about is that reconnection to what we originally did as human beings, you know, on our bare feet, out there, hunters, gatherers. And for me, ultra running kind of connects, you know, the body back to this real sense of purity. I always go back to that word. So there's nothing like it. You know, I'm a passionate skier, a couple of other sports as well, just, you know, as hobbies. But, you know, in terms of looking for something which connects you to something so much greater than yourself, and that sort of shared appreciation for these incredible landscapes, and moving through those landscapes with the sense of, fluidity. There's nothing quite like it.
Yeah, no, that's a cracking response to a very simple question, but the answer inevitably is never going to be simple. And just so you're aware where I'm at, for me, both in my triathlon days, but that was because of running that I ended up in my triathlon days. And then now, what I find is I'll be somewhere because of running, but what I'm getting out of it has absolutely nothing to do with running. And that's all to do with those landscapes and the places that you're in. And, you know, my half Ironman UK in 2014, you know, I was in Exmoor National Park in Wimbledon Lake, and you sort of standing there and you're like, I'm not sure I'd have come here otherwise. And it's right on your doorstep. When I say doorstep, the UK, but it's right here in front of you. But you wouldn't go there if you didn't do that sport. And that's what running has given me. And then I think ultra running for me is that extreme version of that, because you tend to be in these landscapes that are very unique. And unless you are a hiker or a skier, you probably wouldn't see these things that often. But ultra running kind of inevitably gives us that. And you know, that what you've just said about the purity and being alone together as well. I like that. There's many ways I think ultra runners would interpret that. And, you know, I think it's an if you know, you know, and ultra runners will know, will be able to relate to what you've said there for sure.
Yeah, like, you know, as an extension of that as well, because I thought this with the UTS weekend, which, you know, we can touch on what happened over there. But you know, I was thinking that over that weekend, because, you know, there are certain patches, maybe on the route, but, you know, around, you know, sort of the 10-mile radius around Clanberis, where, you know, there's a few sort of like forgotten villages, and it's a bit grey and it's a bit damp, and, you know, you're up on the hills, and sometimes you could be in that exact same environment, not being part of one of these events, and think this is a really grim, grey, horrible day, right? But actually, you know, when you're immersed in an ultra running event, you know, that's completely changed. Like the lens that you're looking at these landscapes through is completely different. You know, the wet and wild adds to the experience and the memories, that secondary fun that we come away with, you know, when the conditions are that bit more gnarly. But you know what I mean? Kind of, it adds that unbelievable lens where you could have two people experiencing very different things in exactly the same spot, if they are or aren't, you know, part of these amazing events, particularly when they're delivered by, you know, these world-class event teams as well. You really know how to put on a show.
Yeah, no, and you're right. The ultra running glasses, you know, they are special. And you know, I'm looking forward to hopefully a long career in this world. And when I say career, it's not really a job. It's definitely just a hobby that has become this thing that just erupted in my life, that actually, it was always the next stage for me. And now I found it. Now I just want to go within the ultra world and see what you can see and get those experiences. So yeah, no, I hear you 100%. So
good.
you mentioned the year 2017. It sounds like you and I probably share that year in a special way, probably for very different reasons. But you know, sort of my biggest achievement to date on the ultra scene has come in that year. I was probably peaking my fitness level, and you know, had it not been for an injury in that year, I think I'd be progressing really well compared to where I'm perhaps at
that was
now.
That was the Grim Reaper, right?
That was the Grim Reaper, yeah, 70 miler I did. Yeah, laps and laps, but 70 miles. I never thought I'd run 10 when I started running, let alone 7 laps of 10 miles. But there you go. So talk to me about 2017. What I know, and if you look at your Instagram, your bio says that you're still talking about it now. And the Coliseum in Rome, I said on the hook there. Do you want to give us a little bit of background and tell us a little bit about this story?
Yeah, well, you know, the full story around 2017 is that actually it came 5 years after what happened in 2012. So in 2012, I pushed my mind to the limit. I was overworking. I wasn't paying any attention to anybody around me, telling me to practice a bit of self-care and just slow down and, you know, focus on your health and your well-being. And I didn't. And after 6 months of, you know, a lot of sort of adrenaline and dopamine and just obsession about, you know, my social impacts with the charity work and everything else, I had a full-scale manic episode in Italy. I by definition, I lost my mind. I lost my sanity and ended up in the middle of a motorway preaching in 2012, backing up the traffic and believing that I was the chosen one. You know, I believed that I'd been put on the planet to ease the world's suffering, and I was so convinced that I'd been selected to do that. So, you know, ended up in psychiatric wards, getting a diagnosis of bipolar disorder. And then, you know, the back end of 2012 were a complete write-off, and, you know, got pretty close to, you know, to not being here anymore. And I'm just so lucky, obviously, for the people I have around me, and the, you know, sort of the critical counselling that I was having straight away, because I was so critical with, you know, this severe case of psychosis. You know, so I was just really fortunate, you know, to have the people around me. And, you know, at the same time, you know, my background's always been in, you know, sports development and coaching in different ways. So I've always been quite open, you know, and quite happy to you know, package a message and share my own experiences. So I just started doing that, you know, over the next 5 years. And, you know, this is oversimplifying how that journey of recovery looked, you know, but, you know, through discovering minimalism and keeping it simple and the trail running and you know, just really giving myself permission to put myself first when I needed to, in terms of my health and my well-being, and slowing down, and this intentionality with how I was going to do things a little bit differently going forwards. At the same time, you know, I was really open about what I'd went through, and I just tried to normalize this experience. And 3 really cool things started to happen. You know, I felt much lighter every time I spoke about my experiences. You know, I built an even greater support network around me. Obviously, I'm not out of the woods with bipolar. There's always that chance that things could go wrong again. But I've got a much greater support network around me. Just can spot those early warning signs. Touch wood, you know, I've been really well for many years. But, you know, I just started giving permission for other people to be open about their own experiences. So it was really 2012 onwards where, you know, I started clicking into this whole mental health national discussion in one way or another, and just contributing my voice, I guess. But to, you know, answer the question, yeah, over the next 5 years, and, you know, feeling much fresher and, you know, practicing what I preach, really, you know, with trail running being sort of integral really to my recovery as well. I just really wanted to create a really positive story to kind of bookend this 5-year chapter. So I couldn't think of a better way to share my story than going back to Italy. But this time, instead of, you know, standing on the middle of a motorway, I was going to run from the Coliseum in Rome back to the London Eye over 65 incredible days. It was like, you know, running through an oil painting for 65 days, pretty much by myself. A couple of friends and family came out at different times. But yeah, 2017, it was just an unbelievable year. It was a bookend. It was a celebration. It was a, you know, a defining chapter in my story. And, you know, for many respects, you know, the journey still continues, Neil. And, you know, I still pinch myself that people still want to hear that 5-year story, whether that's with an NHS trust or, you know, a corporate team or, you know, a festival, live event, whatever that might look like. You know, if I can contribute and I can empower others to speak openly about the challenges that we all face, and I can touch on, you know, the things that work for me, including ultra and trail running, then of course, you know, it's a pleasure to be of service where I can. So yeah, long-winded answer, but yeah, Rome to home in 2017 was something special. It was something special.
So let's talk about that in two ways. Let's do the non-running bit first. So you talk about yourself in 2012 and being on that motorway, and you can almost, if I watch you both in a video that I've seen previously and here today, you can see that you're kind of smiling your way through telling the story. Now that could just be your personality, but also is that part of you recognizing what was going on at the time as well?
Yeah, I mean, it was, it's a tricky, that's a really good question. And, I think it's a tricky conversation to go near sometimes, but, often, and from my experiences, having been part of these different conversations with others that obviously have opened up to me about their experiences, so often you can find these moments of comedy in and amongst the pain and the suffering and the dark clouds. And, when I think back to that time, of course, it was extremely disruptive. It was not to be evangelized. I wouldn't wish those experiences upon anybody, because they can lead to some pretty dark places afterwards. But just the sheer level of how far my mind took me, and the faces of those police officers that showed up, and the ambulance crew, and that perfectly Italian man in his red Fiat Punto at the front of the queue looking at me and thinking, what the hell is this guy on? There were these moments of just sheer, you just could, I still think back and think, oh, did that happen? Did that really happen? And these like micro moments in and amongst the whole thing. And, I genuinely believe that, we were going to set up these headquarters out in the Coliseum. We were going to, surround ourselves with all these celebrities and, the world's kind of most influential voices to get this message out there that, let's just slow down as a global species and, really think about where we're headed as a society, and all this kind of really grandiose thinking. And I do look back on it with real mixed emotions. And the pain part comes from thinking about what my wife Georgie was going through, because she was right there with me through the whole thing. And of course my family just being petrified actually at what was happening to their son or their little brother or their cousin, out in Italy. And then of course the love that I received afterwards was unbelievable. But yeah, just real mixed emotions about that whole chapter. But there have been other moments where again, 2 years on, I believed I was the wealthiest man in the world. And I walked into the BBC and Sky and said to them, I want to give my wealth away. And, I believe that my time was my wealth that I wanted to give away, and all this stuff. So I've had my moments, since 2012 as well. But I don't know. Maybe there's a bit of self-protection there as well, just trying to, look at things with some lighthearted energy.
Yeah, no, and you talk about your family there, and your wife Georgie, and that she's been through it, and that she's still here on this journey with you now. How great is that?
Yeah,
I'm sure there would have been many people that could have potentially jumped ship at that time and given up. And I know that's a really blunt thing to say, but people experience that, right?
It's
when
really tough,
people, loved ones have struggles. So amazing that your family were there, and I'm guessing now they're really proud of where you're going with it and what you're doing with it, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Even 9 months ago, when I said, I'm going out to run 100 miles around Snowdonia, the first thing on my mum's face, we're still really close as a family. It's like, really, didn't you get all this out of your system in 2017? So there's still moments, there's still some big plans, for future projects. But, I think the thing which I reminds everybody about is ultra running is so good for me. In terms of sleeping and eating and slowing down and stepping away from the screens and, getting this heightened energy out of my system, which I do carry. If I let this fly again, if I let this energy fly and didn't practice, all these sort of self-care techniques that, I do have to do daily, really, things could go wrong again. And, I know that trail and ultra running is really integral, to my overall well-being. So, I guess a sense of pride. I think certainly at the finish line at the London Eye with Rome to Home, just the mix of people there was really special, from uni mates or my family, my friends, colleagues, other sort of lifestyle adventurers have been there and done these various projects. There's a real kind of an eclectic mix of people that came together to celebrate that particular chapter. So if there's any mention of prize, then I think certainly at the finish line of Rome to Home, I think we that champagne was well deserved at the end.
Yeah, and what I'll do for the viewers and the listeners is I'll stick in the description, I'll stick the link to that video of the highlights, if that's okay, and we'll stick it in the description so that they can visualize that, because that finish line bit really is captured there with just the people both sides as you sort of arrive with a Union Jack and whatever. It just, you know, it looks pretty special and pretty epic, actually. People throw that word epic around a lot, but yeah, I think actually, you know, you coming in, watching that highlights reel was really, I did, you know, we don't know each other. We've only got to know each other recently through our sort of social media accounts and meeting in UTS, but actually watching that video, you could really feel it as an ultra runner. You could feel that, like, that passion from you, but also the pride of the people that were on the side, sort of creating that almost finish line gantry for you at the London Eye, which you can just see there in the background as well, which is cool. So I'll share that video for sure, because it's really, you know, it's really inspiring for me to watch it. And I think other runners that sort of where I'm at in my journey would definitely benefit from maybe hearing this story and actually watching little highlights reel like that, because, you know, let's talk about the running side now. And from the running side, the terrain looked amazing. You know, some of the places that you must have passed through to get from Rome to the London Eye. So just to clarify, 1,250 miles over 65 days. Break that down for me. How did that work?
Yeah, so I mean, yeah, you know, I love your sentiments, Marshy. You know, I wish we had chatted or met, sorry, before Rome time as well, because we could have, you know, created some, you know, real cool content, you know, around the whole thing. But yeah, you know, I think, yeah, with Rome to home, it sort of broke down as averaging 20 miles a day over the whole thing, which, you know, at the time, you know, I look back now and think, actually, you know, I could have probably pushed myself a bit harder, but I was relatively new to ultra running, actually. So, you know, through that 5-year recovery, it was all about just general trail running. But, you know, this was the first large scale adventure that I was going to take on. So I didn't really know what I was in for. But yeah, I gave myself pretty much a year to get ready for the whole thing. I thought that 20 miles a day average would feel achievable. You know, it felt like I could push myself on some days and go easy on some others. My biggest day was 54 miles running to Paris. You know, so I felt really strong after, I think it was like 50 days, you know, all the way up through Italy. We can talk about the landscape in a minute, but, you know, up through Switzerland, up through France. And then that, you know, waking up a couple of days before Paris and thinking, actually, if I just kind of have a couple of easy days and then arrive in Paris in style, that would be something special. So 54 miles running into Paris. I remember the next day being at the top of the Eiffel Tower and thinking, I've just run here from the Coliseum. This is cool. And I've got this in the bag. Just take it easy from here forwards. But yeah, a couple of rest days. I had a couple of friends come out at different points with their bikes, or, you know, a couple of mates come out to run alongside me. My uncle drove out for 24 hours in the middle of France and drove back out again, stayed in an Airbnb. With the accommodation, I was carrying everything with me. So I think I wild camped maybe 15 or 16 nights. So I had a little bivvy bag with me, my really kind of small, lightweight sleeping bag. But yeah, it was a real mix of, you know, Airbnbs or just, you know, the odd hotel every other week, you know, from booking.com or whatever. But I was really lucky as well with the route, because, you know, when I started looking at it and obviously pulling up Google Earth and just trying to map out, you know, the best route from Rome to London, at first I was going to kind of veer off towards Monaco, dodge the Alps and then come up that way. But then I discovered the Via Francigena pilgrimage route that links Canterbury Cathedral all the way down to the Vatican. So even today, that route is celebrated, and particularly from the Alps down to Rome, you do get hundreds and hundreds of people still walking to the Vatican, you know, for their own pilgrimages, their own journeys of connection. You know, and still the UK part and the France part is still quite popular, but loosely speaking, I followed that, you know, from Rome northbound. So of course, if, you know, I had the Union Jack on my chest, I was running and going in the opposite direction. So every single person walking down to Rome wanted to stop and talk to me. So again, that kind of sense of vulnerability and being out there by myself was actually a huge sense of connection to everybody, you know, coming along the Via Francigena towards me. You know, so the route was just majestic. You know, I'm not a particularly religious person, but, you know, with the pilgrim's passport, you're able to stay in these different, you know, registered, you know, whether it's convents or, you know, farmyards or listed buildings associated with the pilgrimage route. You know, and that sense of all journeying through this landscape where even Napoleon and his men, you know, took the same footsteps. You know, you felt really connected to something bigger than just yourself. So yeah, really, really special.
So just on the overnight stays, were you ever staying where there are other people staying as well?
Yeah, I was. And the coolest story from that was, you know, I think it was on day 5 where was just out in the middle of nowhere in Tuscany, really dusty day. I had everything with me. I was starting to feel really strong now, 3, 4, 5 days into the adventure, I'm getting into my rhythm. And then, this girl, Julia, was coming the other way, and we just stopped and, shared some food together, like, a lot of people did. And we spent about, 45 minutes together. She went on her way, I went on mine. And then just when I got to the English Channel before, dropping over to the UK, I got a message from her saying, I'm flying to London to see you at the end. So she kept in touch and followed my journey continually up through the rest of Italy, over the Alps, up to the UK. And then she was right there at the finish line as well. So it just added to that sense of, and that was because of the story. It was because of that 5-year journey and that connection. She had her own lived experiences with her mental health. But it's that kind of thing which just unfolded, which you can never have written. And there were so many moments, throughout these 65 days, which, I just still pinch my skin. I just still can't believe, these small sort of moments of magic happened along the way.
Yeah, no, listening to this is, absolutely in awe. What a challenge. What a journey. An adventure. You use the word adventure 3 days into the adventure. You're just out there and, you're talking about countries there, and anyone who's got any sense of trail running or ultra running, just when you name the countries that you've been through, we know there's going to be some elevation in this. We know that. So tell us a bit about that, because in the videos you can see that, and it makes sense from someone who's involved with ultra running. But just try and explain that terrain and what it really was like.
Yeah, I mean, it was just some of the most beautiful single track trails that you could ever wish for. I went, up and over the Alps. I was a kid in a candy shop, and I was listening to Pixar soundtrack a lot of the time as well. And I did feel like this kind of 10-year-old just floating and bouncing, through that landscape. So, when I was approaching Aosta, ready to go up and over the Great St. Bernard Pass and dropping down to the other side in Montreux near Lake Geneva, then going out the other side, it was really sort of this packaged, pretty much 7 days actually, once you enter the gateway to the Alps, but really 5 really intense days within a week, where I just called it the Alp stage, and I released a special edition video during that time about the Alp stage in particular, because it was this isolated sort of packaged micro adventure within the bigger Rome to Home projects. But those 5 days, I still put them down as 5 of the most beautiful and empowering 5 days of my life, just to know that by that point, after a month setting off from Rome, feeling that sense of self-reliance with everything I could carry in my backpack, and, knowing exactly how much water to carry every day. The water turned out to be the heaviest thing that I was carrying when needed through Tuscany on those really hot days, for example. So, getting to the Alps and having that feeling of strength and self-reliance, and, just appreciating that if I clear this landscape, then I've got this whole adventure in the bag. There was that sense of looking after myself whilst I was out there. But again, it was just this sense of awe that we can all relate to. And we got a taste of this over in Wales. But, you feel so small, yet you feel so grand in terms of the fact that you can navigate these landscapes, and you look back down the valley and think, holy crap, I've run from there, and you can barely see, the fog and the clouds disappearing off in the distance from hundreds of miles away. And there's just something so special about that. And then the coolest moment about crossing the Alps in particular was my uncle. He's an airline pilot, and he was living in Dubai at the time. So I got a text, it was 2 days up to go up to the Great St. Bernard Pass from Aosta. And I woke up on day 2, halfway up, and I got a text from my uncle saying, I'm flying into Turin. I'm coming to find you. I'm going to get a hire car. I'm flying into Turin. I'm on my way. I'm going to come and find you. Where are you? And he forgot that this was the day I've been visualizing for so long, reaching the peak of the Alps. And he said, I'll see you up there. See you in a bit. So, there I was in the middle of this 65-day challenge, day 2 of this adventure, going up the Alps. And then, go over the crest at the top, the hostel with this amazing history. Again, when Napoleon hunkered down with his men at the top of the Great St. Bernard Pass, an amazing history with this place. I'll go over the crest, and there's my uncle standing there with 2 ice cold beers waiting for me. And I was a mess. I was just an absolute mess. And we just embraced each other. We couldn't talk for 10 minutes. And it was just something so, so special. And again, it just goes back to the people that you share these unique experiences with. And like you said, right at the start, Marshy, I wouldn't have been there in that moment. And me and my uncle, we wouldn't have had that connection in that moment had it have not been for trail running and ultra running. Yeah. Just something special.
Yeah, no. And so that was a question I had about support crew and how did it work. And but I'm getting the picture now, and the listeners will be as well, that you were self-sufficient, but then there were moments within that where people came and you were with others, you know, whether you knew them or not. But and like you say, that story of your uncle is it, that'll be the day that you always remember with him, right?
Totally. Yeah. 100%. Yeah, it was really cool. And, I don't know what it was about wanting the adventure to be self reliant. And, I think that, obviously added to the story, I guess. I didn't want it to be a crude adventure, for this particular one anyway. I think it added to kind of the full circle story about, I did the homework through that, journey of recovery over those 5 years, and, to channel kind of that inner strength, I guess, into, this quite positive story at the end of it was amazing. But yeah, I'd be lying if I didn't, nab the odd sweet or, can of Coke off my mates that were cycling alongside me, but just don't tell anyone.
Yeah. No, that's cool. Yeah. So when you came across the channel, which I'm assuming was by ferry, was it? So now you're back in the UK. What's that feeling? And then beyond that, what was the feeling as you entered London, and then that final feeling? Take us through that process of being home.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. I mean, there was an element of sadness that the adventure was coming to an end. I was loving every second of being out there, but at the same time, I grew up on the South Coast. So, touching base in New Haven and then going over the Seven Sisters towards Eastbourne was just so beautiful, over towards Beachy Head. And, this iconic landscape on the South Coast that I grew up with was really, really cool, knowing that I ran here from Rome. And then, just winding up towards London and just feeling the momentum with other mates and, family members coming out to join me. And then, as you say, that final day on the 25th of October, 2017, waking up in Bromley at my mate's house and then working over to Greenwich Park, which a lot of people were going to run that final leg with me from Greenwich Park along the Thames, along the South Bank, to the London Eye. It was really hard to put into words. And, I remember the comedy moment being that we got to Tower Bridge and we just had to stop, and I just had to, I felt this weight of, oh my God, like this is it. This is the moment after a year, really, a year and 64 days of picturing this moment. Here I was, and I had, 30 to 40 of my mates with me doing the running section. I knew that there might be one or two people at the finish line. And then the idea was that, we would all go in together, but I just put the afterburners on and I just lost it. I just had to, I just had to get there, and I just whacked, Queen on the headphones. I had Freddie Mercury with me, and I just put the afterburners on. And, as soon as I saw those bubbles with the London Eye just round from, the South Bank Centre, it was just a done deal. I just had to get there. And you saw what happened at the end. It was pretty special. I've got to give a shout out to Calm as well, the campaign against living miserably, who I was raising money for, because they really got invested in the adventure. So it went far beyond just raising money for them. It was a story, and they're all about, preventing male suicide. So, to work sort of collaboratively with them to maximize the messaging around the adventure was, a real privilege as well. So massive shout out to them.
Yeah. And in the 5 years since then, I think male suicide has become more of a topic that is talked about, and that we do touch on more men now are willing to try and speak and share their emotions. But when you were doing it, did you ever foresee that? Did you think that, God, what I'm doing now is actually going to be more important in the future?
That's a good question. I mean, I knew the stats, right? And we know that the stats, they haven't really significantly changed for years. And we're still waiting on the stats from, the past 2 years, really, through, what's happened through the pandemic. But, there are still over 5,600 registered suicides every year, 75% of which are male. And that was more or less the same back in 2017, believe it or not. So, things haven't significantly changed. So that sense of a lot of work still needing to be done, was very much with me whilst I was out there. And, I think just the stats speak for themselves at the time. And, but, did I know that it was then going to feed into this new chapter in my career? And being invited to contribute my voice more so to this whole conversation? No way. And we might be jumping the gun, but, shout out for Mike at the National Running Show. He loved what I was creating. We hadn't connected before, but he reached out on social media and said, do you want to come up to the National Running Show? And speak about Rome to home. So I did that. And then there was a nurse from an NHS trust in the audience who said, we need, these positive stories with lived experiences such as bipolar. Would you mind coming to speak to our NHS trust? And up until then, I didn't know that the world of, speaking or corporate speaking was even a thing. Genuinely, I didn't know that it was a thing. So, I couldn't have anticipated where the journey would take me, but here we are now on the podcast, and you're right. Maybe it's a conversation for another day where we could have, a number of men on the podcast, to talk about this stuff in more detail, because there's still such a sense of work that still needs to be done out there, while celebrating how much the conversation has moved on. And there's so much great work being done out there, but yeah, onwards and upwards.
Yeah, I never judge a book by its cover, right? Everyone's heard that saying. I once picked up a book called Running Free, and it was actually about a lady who was in locked in syndrome, and she was a runner, but she was running free from this situation that she found herself in. And she talks about being locked in and everything else. Kate Allett, and lived in the Sheffield area. And great book. I stuck with it. I'm not a big reader, and I stuck with it and I read it. And then what I realized is the reason I picked up the book and judged it by the cover was because running free was what I was actually in the process of doing, which just by coincidence is in 2012 for me as well. And I was running free. And do you know what? Sometimes I often talk to my parents about what on earth would I be doing without running. And the more men I speak to within this world, the more I realize how much running, trail running, ultra running is playing a massive part in their homeostasis of like who they are.
Yeah.
And it's something that, equilibrium's a hard thing. We're normally quite high or we're low. To be in the middle and non-emotional, if you like, is a difficult place to be. But running, for me personally, can balance that really well. Yeah. And when I'm injured, just talking about running and adventures and actually listening to those adventures more, hence why this podcast is probably, where it started from, and we wanted it to be that platform. Running's so important in that mental health discussion. And in particularly, I'm finding anecdotally with men as well. It's a real big part of what we're doing, and why we do it is around sort of our mental well-being and our mental state, and the want to pay it forward to others is really becoming quite something that I'm seeing more and more and more the more I talk to people, and I love it. And that's,
and if because it was obviously, I skimmed through previous episodes and, digested the ones that really jumped out at me, but you must have found this as well from your previous guest, kind of as an extension of what you're saying there about, the need to, pay it forwards. Yeah, for sure. But, so many ultra runners that I come across, I do find have had some sort of lived experiences where they've found and nurtured and harnessed that sort of inner grit that they use when they're out there in the mountains. And I think, I live 10 minutes down the road from Churchill here, and, he always preached what Viktor Frankl said around when suffering finds meaning, it ceases to be suffering. So when we can channel those lived experiences into something positive and apply meaning to what we've gone through, and for some that's trail running, for that's ultra running, it's, channeling that grit into navigating these, challenging landscapes. I think there's such an awesome conversation still to be had around that. And it's happening, but I find that so often with those that I connect with. I love it.
And like you've said already, you've touched on, there's probably a load of different discussions we could have with many different people and many stories for another day. But the club that I'm the founder of here in Cambridge, which is called High Runners, basically Histon and Impington is the village that I kind of grew up in, and it had a ladies only running club, and that was great. But I wanted one where men could be involved, and at the same time that I created my gym and the Fit Fam that we have, and this family unit across the running club and the gym. And I did it because I wanted to pay forward my own experience, right? But someone presented to me about 2 years ago, and she's absolutely right. I didn't just create something to pay it forward. I created what I needed for me at the time as well. But I wasn't conscious of that. Whereas going into creating the podcast, I'm now conscious that I need to talk about it so that other people can talk about it, to pay it forward and get those stories out there. So I guess what I'm trying to create here is that platform where we as ultra runners can talk. And it's what I said at the beginning. This is all to do with the reason you and I are here is because of running. But actually, not much of what we're talking about so far is actually running specific, but it is. And it just is that vicious cycle of like, come on, guys, there's so many stories out there. And hearing your Coliseum Rome to home is just, for me, that is everything that I vision what running is, you know, and you know, it's a unique experience to you. And, you know, it would be something I'd be interested in having a look at running, just to try and take in those sights that you took in and try and understand what you got out of it, you know.
Yeah, I've got two things to add to that. So, you know, for those just listening to this, I can see Neil absolutely lighting up whilst he's talking about all of that, guys. But, you know, I'm tinkering with the idea of going back the other way and doing home to Rome, but, you know, potentially in a slightly pacier format. So watch this space. But yeah, if you mean what you're saying there about seeing some of the landscapes, then, you know, whether it's the whole thing or part of it or a couple of days, then, you know, I'm sure we can work that out.
Yeah, sure. 100%. I'll definitely join you on some of those bits that I could fly to and get to, for sure. Awesome. That would be amazing. So, in terms of that feeling, then on the finish line, what about the days that followed? Was there you know, people talk about these running blues and these event blues. How did you go? How did you feel?
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting that, because you know, I mean, what happened on that motorway in 2012 felt like a finish line. You know, I felt like, oh, this was it. This was the person I was always supposed to become. I've done it. Here I am. I've arrived. Whereas, you know, I was so aware of, you know, the energy that I was pumping into Rome to Home 5 years on, that I had to really be attentive of that. And I had to kind of really proactively put some safety measures in place, because I was always in danger of becoming depressed after the adventure. You know, so for me, arriving at the London Eye, it felt like, you know, yes, celebrating that 5-year journey, but it was also the start of a brand new chapter ahead. You know, it felt like closure on what happened, but the start of a brand new chapter ahead. And, you know, as we've sort of nodded to, I could never have anticipated where that adventure, you know, would take me in terms of, you know, the mental health landscape in particular. You know, so from that point of view, I was actually okay. You know, suddenly it was, you know, I had it in the bag, and there was that sense of pride because there'd been a few non-starters in the past with other projects, obviously with the psychosis and the mania, where I got hooked on bringing something to life. But finally, you know, I delivered this passion project, which I put so much of my heart and soul into. And, you know, now it's just something to be celebrated and to start a brand new chapter. So, yeah, certainly I was okay then. But, you know, as we've, you know, touched on with the UTS, for example, you know, with the, 5 years on from 2017, it's been great now to focus on sort of the single stage event. So whether it's with the Maverick races or Ultra X or Threshold or Race to the King, or, you know, the South Coast Ultra last year with 100k over the South Downs. And then, of course, leading up to the Ultra Trail Snowdonia, which easily the flagship event that I've attended as part of the UTMB series. You know, the single stage ultra stuff over the past 5 years since have been, you know, it's been brilliant, and a completely different ball game, you know, from a multi-day point-to-point adventure challenge to a single stage ultra race. Completely different ball game, which a lot of people forget. You know, I always get those messages, oh, you should have it in the bag, should be a breeze. It's not. It still takes a lot of hard work. And you saw, you know, what some of that elevation was like when we were over in Wales.
Yeah, and let's talk about that now, because, you know, you've got this in the bag, you should be able to do it. But we're here because we met at UTS, and we actually met on the UTS 50k route. But as you've kind of mentioned just there, and before earlier on, is that actually that was day 2, because it was meant to be day 1. It was meant to just be one stage, but it was meant to be 100-mile one stage, right?
Yeah.
So talk to me about what happened. How did that weekend go down? Now, anyone who's watched the previous episode, they'll know the answer to this, but go for it. Go on.
I mean, you put your name down for this event. It's part of the UTMB Global Series. 7 months on, you're over in Llanberis. You're there a few days before the race. You know, you're getting the stones under your feet. You're looking up at the landscape. There you are, 11 a.m. on that Friday, 1st of July. You're good to go. You set off. You're there. You're part of that UTMB family. It's iconic. You're at the Slate Museum. Bam, you're off, right? And you've been obsessing about this race for 7 months. And you know, going into the weekends, you know, I didn't feel like my training was optimal. You know, I'm a dad to a 3-year-old with Max, and you know, I think I could have, you know, all things being equal, I could have done more, but I did the best that I could. But actually, when I got to Canberra, I felt really strong, and you know, and after a couple of hours of being on this terrain, you're suddenly hit with how gnarly this is. So, you know, you're straight up Snowdon. The warm up is up Snowdon. That's the warm up on the 100-mile route over 2 days. You know, I set myself a target of 48 hours. The cutoff was 50. It was 50 hours. My personal target was, look, if I complete it in 2 days, I'll be happy. Anything else is a bonus. So I took all the pressure off. Roam to home experience. So no pressure going into it. But, you know, just be kind to yourself, practice what you preach. But I felt strong. You know, go over to Snowdon, drop down the other side. I'm like, damn, you're feeling good. It's like you feel well rested. You know, so that strength was there. The aid stations were amazing. The volunteers were amazing. But, you know, it gets to like 1 p.m., 2 p.m. and you start to go over some of the technical climbs. You're thinking this is already a little bit sketchy. The clouds rolling in. It's got a bit dark. You know, your jackets are on and it's like mid-afternoon in July, right? You're thinking this shouldn't be the case, but, you know, you're layering up already. You know, and it felt a little bit unnerving. And, you know, I wouldn't put myself out there as a technical climber, you know, not really, but I was faced with some of the biggest sort of scrambling I've ever done over these ridge lines. And, you know, you're dropping down, it's getting towards 4, 5, 6 o'clock in the evening, 7 o'clock, you know, the sun's going down and, you know, you're literally at 45 degrees at this point, running along the side of a reservoir up in the Snowdonia National Park, sleet, rain, you're looking through the slit, you know, between your jacket and your headbands. And you just head down, cracking on. But the pain of it is that I felt strong. I felt like I've got this and I could probably complete this in 36 hours. That's where I was. Turned a corner. You're looking for the small mountain hut, which is your next aid station, getting towards 8 p.m. in the evening. And you see this little speck of light and you knew that you're going to get a quick, you know, warm cup of tea, you know, throw down some whatever sandwiches and peanuts and human food bars and then crack on. And you get there and you get a huge burly hug from one of the volunteer crew saying, mate, it's been cancelled. They pulled the plug on it. The conditions are too treacherous. Come on in, take a breath. So just couldn't believe it. There was a moment, you know, I did shed a tear briefly, but, you know, it's just a kind of a sense of, I don't know what it was. It was just my body releasing emotion. You know, I can't really pin it down, but, you know, stepping into that hut, there's probably 30 of us in there, a big cheer every time somebody came through the door, a cup of tea arrives in your hands, the fire's on, somebody's got a bit of background music, you're waiting for the minibuses to go back down to base camp. It's getting on for 11 p.m. And then you've got a choice to make because you can either can it and come back the following year, or you could get up in 3 hours' time to get ready to set out on day 2 on the dedicated 100-kilometer race, which 3 guys did, I believe, or have an extra couple of hours sleep, reset, grab a shower, have a decent breakfast, and start at 9 a.m. on the dedicated 50-kilometer race. And so after 50K on the Friday, I thought, actually, there's a lot of synergy in that. Let's come away with 2 50-kilometer independent races and, you know, celebrate 100K from this weekend. But yeah, could never have written it.
Yeah, it was kind of dramatic on the sideline as well. You'd think something like that would be simple. They'd just say it's been cancelled and then we watched you guys come back kind of thing. But it wasn't, because I happened to be with one of the volunteers who was meant to be on the aid station that was about to open for the front runners, to the point where we were about to take her to that aid station because she didn't drive. And I thought, well, it'd be good. I'll get some, you know, I had my media badge. I thought I'll get some interviews there and I'll hang around there for the evening. And then literally the news started to filter through to the volunteer team and you thought, oh, wow. And you pull the van door open and look outside up the mountain. And you're like, you can't see the mountain because it was literally covered. So from being down there, it was like, this is really obvious to us. Yeah. And we felt for you straight away because all the things you just said, you just confirmed that that's how you'd be feeling. You know, you've done all of that process, you know, a whole 7 months for one event, and then literally Mother Nature can sort that out for you, and just end the event. So, you know, we felt that for you. And so you get up 9 a.m. There you are. You're on the start line again, and you're going to do 50K this time. Yeah. And some of that weather, I understand, just before the halfway point on the 50K, had taken its toll on a couple of the trails as well.
Yeah, it was boggy. Yeah, it was really boggy. It was really heavy underfoot. You know, I think it was before the aid station when we had that beautiful encounter for the first time, Marshy. But yeah, it was boggy. It was really heavy underfoot. But you know, it was offset by some really, you know, nice dry technical descents. But yeah, it was, you know, that whole weekend, and I think that's why I loved it, you know, just threw everything at you. You know, within those 2 days, you literally had everything apart from snow, but you had literally everything thrown at you because the conditions actually on day 2 were amazing. But yeah, you're right. You know, for the week leading up to the UTS and the day before, you know, there was nowhere for any water to dissipate, not really. So it was so boggy underfoot, which saps a lot of your energy. You know, so all I was really focused on was my average pace and just making sure that I could cross, you know, each checkpoint by the cutoff. Ultimately, you know, I didn't really care about my time on day 2. I was just out there to enjoy it and to lift my head up. The one thing which I did allude to on social media after the weekend is that, you know, I was a couple of hours into day 2, and I realized I didn't really refuel properly after day 1. So I didn't, you know, I say hearty breakfast, but I didn't really have, you know, a whole load of calories really to reset ready for day 2. So I was actually considering dropping out at that first aid station unless I could find some decent food. So I knocked on the closed pub behind the first aid station on day 2, and they whacked out a plate of sausage, chips, and beans for me a couple of hours early before they opened. So I sacrificed, you know, 20 minutes out the race to waff it down, but you know, completely reset me and yeah, allowed me to power on, and yeah, it worked. It definitely worked.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think you're right, that calorie deficit from that first day,
Yeah.
that adrenaline could have easily made you forget to refuel. Was it not that you forgot, or was it just that there just wasn't enough time between getting back and getting up again?
Yeah, a bit of both. Yeah, a bit of both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And obviously, so I don't know if you spoke to Mike at UTS at all, if you got a chance to have a chat with race director Mike, but obviously UTMB have come up with this new World Series, and this very much is the first year, if you like, and the UTS is the one race in the UK that has got that status and the new kind of qualifying mechanism.
Yeah.
What do you think to it all? What do you think to the world of ultra running and the UTMB, the World Cup of running, as I once called it?
Yeah.
You know, what do you think to that?
Yeah, I mean, for the event in its own, you know, in its own right, you know, the event over there is unbelievable. I'd endorse it all day long, and you know, really promote it for anybody to get over to Wales to do it. Not even just for the, you know, the running stones that you collect from the races, obviously for the UTMB in Chamonix, but you know, the event in its own right is something special. You know, the volunteers have, you know, been there for years doing it as part of just the Apex led events previously, but now that it is part of the bigger UTMB machine, you know, the level of delivery and the kind of attention to detail, you feel it, you know, in the lead up to the event, the moment you arrive, when you see that big, the big box, you know, start and finish line, and, you know, just the level of, yeah, even just branding and sponsorship, you know, but you feel it and you feel part of this global series. But, you know, you sense it from the moment you register and you pick up your bag and your race number and the map and, you know, your photo for the security team, which is, you know, strapped to your bag from the moment you arrive in a good way. So, you know, that level of security is there right from the off. They made all the correct decisions over the weekends, you know, so huge kudos. So of course, there's always things to learn. You know, any event like this, you're always going to develop it, you know, even the one out in Chamonix. But yeah, huge kudos. And, you know, even when they had to pull the plug on the 100-mile distance, it was absolutely the right thing to do. And their confidence to lean into that and to do that was world class. And then, you know, in terms of, yeah, the UTMB on the global ultra running scene, you know, I've always said that there's space for every type of event out there. You know, there's the backyard ultras to the hard rocks to the UTMBs. I love it. You know, I love it. And, you know, I think we're still many years away from it being too commercialized. You know, sort of mainstream, you know, running and the commercialization that comes with that into, you know, trail and ultra running. I think we're years away from that just yet. And I think that's always going to be protected by, you know, the grassroots connecting with nature groundswell, which we know, you know, is what appeals to so many trail and ultra runners. But, you know, I think there's space for every type of event out there. And why shouldn't we have a flagship global series such as the UTMB, which consistently delivers that level of attentiveness and, you know, quality of delivery, I guess, with every event that they put on out there. And obviously I've only done the UTS, but you can see it from all the other events from Andorra through to, you know, through to Thailand, you know, through to Italy, the other events in the Alps. And yeah, fingers crossed my 3 running stones are enough to get me out to Chamonix in 2023.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with everything you're saying. And Mike and I had a chat on our episode that he kindly came on and did. And you know what, you talk about grassroots there as well. It's really interesting because in other sports, they've got every level. And all right, the top of the top can be very financially lucrative, and I understand that. And there's always going to be a part of that with sponsorship and everything else. But sometimes that helps fuel the grassroots. And for me, this just looks like a really positive move. And now that I've actually met the founder or the co-founder, Catherine, she was brilliant. She was there when you ran through the aid station at aid station 2.
Yeah,
Don't know if you were aware of that at the time.
I was, yeah. She's awesome.
It was just amazing to meet her. And I just thought, this little French lady, and she just was full of it. She was full of the passion, and she just loved what it was and what it stood for. But she was so humble with it. And I just, she couldn't believe that I would call it the World Cup of running. But it was just an interesting conversation with her. And I think this move is amazing, and hopefully we will continue to see the benefits of that to the grassroots, and the inspiration for little events to pop up and be more readily available for more runners. That's what I'd like to see as a result. So anyway, we could talk for absolutely ever, I reckon, on this stuff. But I did want to just, if we can, quickly touch on, we have a lot anyway, but mental health and running. How big a tool is this? How big a tool is running for mental health?
Yeah, I think it's massive. I mean, I don't, I never like to preach and, say what people should do. I don't like shooting all over people, I always say, but, that's what I tried to do in 2012, effectively, was try to force the world to do something they didn't want to do. But, as an invitation to benefit from this incredible lifestyle and this sport, which we all know and love, I could harp on about the mental benefits all day long, from the escapism to the purity, to the flow, to the connection. There are just so many, I don't know, just beautiful truths that come out of being part of this amazing sport. And, it's still really hard to put into words, and I probably should take some time to do so, because, I'm always fusing and dancing between these two conversations between trail ultra running and mental health. But there's nothing like it. And I think it's very different from pounding the pavements and, going out on the tarmac as well. I think, just being immersed in nature, where there aren't four walls, there's very rarely a square for you to be surrounded by, and just being immersed in nature, there's just something so incredible about that environment. And it's probably a whole nother conversation for another day to to unpack it a bit more articulately. But for sure, in terms of a connection to those that have typically gone through some lived experiences that they're channeling into journeying through these landscapes together, I don't think there's many other sports which deliver that on such an amazing level.
Yeah, no, completely agree. So, quick fire question.
Yeah.
All things considered, everything you've done already, is there a bucket list race? Is there a bucket list of what you want to achieve in the ultra world?
Yeah, I mean, like UTMB is definitely there, and also the Tour de France over 3-5 days around the Aosta Valley, which I love that location anyway. But yeah, I've always toyed with the idea of doing a lap of the UK. The premise being that Rome's Home was my story. Now I'd love to create another platform to do 365 days of other people's stories, and using that platform to do so. So we'll see. I've got another child on the way in October, so yeah, the stars. Cheers, yeah, another trail runner on the way. But yeah, the stars definitely need to align for something of that scale. And as I briefly mentioned, I'd love to pace it back the other way, back down to Rome. And again, there's a big social mission attached to Rome to Home. But if Home to Rome could represent something a bit more sort of down the line with an ultra running challenge in terms of pacing it a little bit more. And sort of the 5 years of experience that I've gleaned from ultra running over the past 5 years, I do things a little bit differently. Maybe an FKT on the Via Francigena, who knows? But watch this space, and I'm sure we can jump on the pod, way down the line, maybe in a year or two's time, Marshy, and see where we're at then.
Yeah, no, that'd be really good to have you back on and discuss it all. Yeah. So I'll pop everything I can in the description, so that if people do want to kind of follow and have a look at some of this, they can see the tangible side of it as well through those links. So I'll make sure I pop it in there. So if anyone listening or watching does want to follow Dan and have a look, then do click on those links in the description on whatever platform it is that you are listening or watching. But for me, Dan, thanks for coming on the show. This has been unbelievable and a bit of a journey through the show, actually, which has been really cool. And, I'm really, really pleased to sort of have had the opportunity to ask you those questions and to hear what you've had to say about them as well. Just phenomenal and complete awe for what you've achieved. And you know, if I could do half of what you've done, mate, that'd be amazing. So, but yeah, so for me, thanks very much for coming, Dan. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, cheers, Neil, and keep it up with the podcast. The feeling's mutual, and yeah, you're definitely going to have to come and join me during Home to Rome if that manifests.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So, guys, I hope you enjoyed the episode. Hope there's some things there that really helped in terms of your kind of absorption as a sponge, for that running journey that you're on. Or if you think there is anyone that might kind of benefit from what Dan's had to say there, then please share this episode onto them and the links across to them. But I hope you've all enjoyed yourselves. And if you could just give us a little rating and a little review, that would be much appreciated on whatever platform it is. Do feel free in the comments section, wherever you are, to let us know what it is you're up to, because it's always good to understand what our listeners and viewers are doing in their own ultra running journeys. But from me today, that's everything. Cheers once again, Dan. We really appreciate it. And I hope that we can all meet here once again to discuss more on the Ultra Running Podcast with me, Coach Marshy.